Hello guys, and welcome back to Joe's Ventures, and today we're going to be doing part 81, believe it or not. We're already in the upper reaches of 100, so that's going to be really awesome. This is again part 81, so there's a couple of animals that have been remastered in this one, but we've got a couple of new ones as well at the end, so this is kind of a catch-up one, and hopefully it shouldn't be too long, but we're going to be starting off today with the black Arowana. So if you can have a look at these little guys here. These guys were made by Leaf, Buffzoo and Jen. So a bit of an assortment, some updates just to make it look a little nicer. Let's see if we can get one proper swimming over here. So this is the black Arowana, not the silver Arowana. So these guys are bony fish that's in the family of Arowanas. They're related to the silver Arowana and the Asian Arowana, fishes like that. And these guys typically live in tropical South America, that's where they're native to, and restricted to the Rio Negro Basin. But they've also been discovered in the Orinoco Basin in the 1970s, and people are not sure whether this is a deliberate introduction, or this came apart naturally, or they were there to begin with, or just not found. So there's questions there. So as you can see, these black Arowanas, these have quite an elongated body with this like tapered tail going on. Their maximum length is considered to be about 0.9 meters or about 3 feet long, but there are reports of individuals reaching about 1.3 meters or 3.9 feet long, though that's kind of reports that's not really substantiated that well. The juveniles are black with yellow markings down the length and head and tail, but once they reach 15 centimeters, these markings disappear and then they look like the adults with these like steel gray to black colorations where they get the name the black Arowana. And additionally, they actually yellow to red outlines of the dorsal, caudal, and tail fins, in contrast to the juveniles. And the adults are very similar to the silver Arowana that I mentioned before, but there are different species from a few different metrics. And some Asian aquarists actually occasionally refer to the Arowana, so the Asian Arowana, silver, and black Arowana and its relatives, as dragonfish because they have these really interesting scales that kind of look like the scales of dragons, and they actually are believed to give good luck, so they're kind of a prosperity charm. So if you have an Arowana as an aquarium, it's a good luck charm, so that's pretty cool. So in terms of behavior, these guys are also called water monkey or monkey fish because they are known to jump out of water to catch prey with their mouths, and they'll often swim near the surface and then lunge out for food. They've been known to eat large prey such as small monkeys and bats as well, so that's very interesting. Though their main diet often consists of shrimp, insects, smaller fish, and other animals that float along the water surface, and that's why they have that drawbridge-like mouth that allows them to feed off the surface of the water. And the females will typically spawn during the high water season, or the wet season, and they have about 210 eggs that they usually brood in the mouth of the male, and the young are only really fully released when they're about 7 centimeters long, so the adult male kind of has them in his mouth until they're 7 centimeters long, and then spit out. So these guys are they're quite a common fish, both in the pet trade. They're kind of a cheaper alternative to your Asian Arowana, and common in the wild. So that's why they're least concerned. They're pretty secure in their habitat, although basically things like habitat destruction, things like that, does threaten populations and things like that, much like other species in the Amazon. Really awesome. So again, done by Leaf, Buffzoo, and Jen. Next one was also done by Leaf, Buffzoo, and Jen. This is the remake. We're going to have a look over here to these wonderful guys. We have got the Tambaqui, also known as the Pacu, or the black Pacu. So these guys are native to freshwater habitats in the Amazon and Orinoco rivers in southern South America. And they like nutrient-rich white waters in these areas, or nutrient black waters. They kind of occur at the lower range. They tend to like nicer water, and they're widely kept in aquaculture as well from the ranges across South America. And they're also known from the Miocene in the Madeira River, with modern occurrences of this species are actually introductions by humans. So these are really cool pacu. So these guys are the heaviest charion in the ocean, in the Americas, and the second heaviest scaled freshwater fish in the world, after the arapaima. They can reach about 1 meter long, or about 3.6 feet, and about 44 kilograms or 97 pounds in weight, but their more typical size is about 0.7 or 2.3 feet. And the record for a rod and reel capture for these guys is about 32 kilograms or 71 pounds. And after the flood season, about 10% of the weight of this guy, or the paku's weight, is fat. And so that's like reserves to go into the dry season. And at least another 5% is found in the heart and muscles, which is pretty interesting. So they're quite similar in shape to the piranha, and they sometimes are confused with this fish, but they're actually very, very different. Even though they look similar, they're quite different. They have large teeth that allow them to eat like nuts and things that they typically eat on, and they almost look like molars, and they used to crush seeds and nuts as well. And their lower half of their bodies, you can see, mostly blackish, where they get their name. And they have these small pectoral fins and stuff like that that are more rounded and stuff like that. Really, really cool. So in terms of their ecology, they're mostly solitary, but they will migrate in large schools. And during the non-breeding season, they hang out in flooded forests, and then they stay there for about 4 to 7 months during that flood season. But as this water level drops, they move to the main river channels or the floodplain lakes. And then at the start of the next flood, they kind of go up again, and this is during around November to February. The exact spawning location in the white rivers that they go up to spawn are not entirely certain, but they apparently like along woody banks or grassy levees. That's where they kind of like. And larvae have been found in whitewater rivers, including the Amazon itself. And they stay near macrophytes in floodplain of flooded forests year-round, and only switching to adult migration until they reach sexual maturity, with this maturity being at about 60 centimeters long, or about 2 feet long. And they're quite long-lived fish. They can live for up to 40 years, recorded, but they may actually live up to 65 years, so pretty much the same as a person. So very, very interesting. So as I mentioned, they also have the ability to basically use their swim bladder to breathe. So a lot of other fish in the Amazon have this ability. They can go to the surface and use their swim bladder as like a lung. So they're able to take air into their lung, and because there's so many blood vessels around it, the blood vessels can absorb the oxygen from the air and basically allows them to breathe. And in terms of their diet, they tend to feed on fruits and seeds for the most part. And studies show that they're basically 78 to 98% of their diets was fruits, but they will also eat zooplankton and white rice, wild rice, I mean. And they actually are really important in the ecosystems of the Amazon. They help disperse seeds because when they eat them, they go through the digestive system, very similar to what birds, elephants, stuff will do. Goes through the digestive system, then they poop it out somewhere new, and it grows. So they are really effective seed disperser and very important to these rainforests. So in terms of their relationship to humans, they are popular and fetch top prices in fish markets, and they're threatened in some areas because of overfishing and currently caught for juveniles as well. And they're not widely kept in aquaculture, though they can live in oxygen-poor water and are relatively hardy to disease. In Thailand, they're actually known, have been introduced into Hong Kong and things like that as fish farming projects and adapted to the local conditions. There's also an introduced population in Puerto Rico, and some have been caught around the US as well. But yeah, really, really cool. They are considered, I believe, least concern or vulnerable, since they're overall doing well. But as I mentioned, there's declines because of overharvesting and habitat destruction, things like that. So again, done by Leaf, Buffzoo, and Jen. We're going to be moving on to the next one. We've got a very interesting animal here. We have got, this one was done by Leaf, Buffzoo, and Fishing Planet. So this has come from the game Fishing Planet. There's a couple of models that he's updated because there's been a couple games come out. But this is the alligator gar. So really, really beautiful animal here. So the alligator gar is a type of bowfin that is actually the largest freshwater fish in North America. And they are often referred to as primitive fish or living fossils because they look so similar since they evolved in the early Cretaceous period about 110 million years ago. But that's a misnomer because they clearly have evolved a lot during that time, and they've changed species, things like that. It's kind of just like they look old. But they are very, very interesting. And they actually also have a digestive system that's actually quite similar to sharks, and they have the ability to both breathe air and water, similar to like the paku and a lot of other fish I've mentioned that are freshwater. And the common name derives from their looks, since they've got a long, broad snout that looks very much like an American alligator, and they have these broad snouts and these long sharp teeth. There is, in terms of their size, they are generally commonly measured at about 6 feet or 1.8 meters in length and weigh over 100 pounds or 45 kilograms. Though there is anecdotal evidence they may get to about 10 feet or 3 meters and as much as 350 pounds or 459 kilograms. But the largest one recorded is about 8 feet and 5.25 inch, or basically 2.5 meters long, and weighed about 327 pounds or 148 kilos, and the girth of it was about 120 centimeters or 47 inches. So this is the largest recorded, and this fish was actually estimated to be about 50 to 71 years old, and even up to 95 years old, since to get that big, they got to live quite long. But yeah, really, really awesome. So you can see their body is shaped like a torpedo. It allows them to swim through the water pretty easily. They have this brown to olive fading color on their surface as well. And in some cases, they have a high level of melanin, which means they basically go quite dark. And they have these bony, rhomboid-shaped scales here that allow this for protection as well. And it's actually serrated as well. And very hard to grab on these guys. And actually, unlike a lot of gar species, the upper jaw of the alligator gar has a dual row of large sharp teeth, very similar to like moray eels. They've got 2 layers, so it's very interesting. And this allows them to hold and impale prey and just eat them. And they are predators that typically hunt things such as fish, but they will ambush waterfowl, small mammals, basically anything small enough they will eat, which is pretty interesting. So in terms of their populations have been extirpated from much of their historic range, and then as a result of habitat destruction, culling, and I can't think of the word. Unrestricted harvests. Yeah, that's the issue. And populations now primarily found around the southern portion of the US, extending into Mexico. And they're considered Eurylothine, which means they like waters of various salinity, so they can live in freshwater lakes to brackish marshes and bays along the coast of Mexico. So yeah, very, very interesting fish. In terms of their relationship with people, for nearly half a century they were considered trash fish, and they're a nuisance species, and basically they killed all the fish that we want to kill, so let's kill them. But there's been a lot of efforts to try and bring them back in some areas, especially in the 1980s, and they were afforded some protection around like the 80s and 90s to federal and protections as well, and where it's illegal to pretty much kill them. And several federations now, resources like Department of Fish and Wildlife, things like that, now monitor their populations and educate the public. And they've also been cultivated in hatcheries, ponds, pools, raceways, and things like that, for mitigation stocking, and in even Mexico for consumption. It'd be really interesting if they took some of these and reintroduced them to parts of their original range. But luckily they are considered least concerned, so they're not doing too bad. Mainly just reintroducing them into places where they used to be would be a good bet to help ensure their populations further and help them expand to their historic range. But really, really awesome fish. Again, done by Leaf Buffzoo, and the model is from Fishing Planet. So awesome, awesome, awesome. So next we're going to move on to another cool fish. We've got the, sorry about that, by Leaf and Buffzoo, we have got the Humphead Wrasse. So a very nice big fish. So this is the Humphead Wrasse. So this is probably the 3rd time we've covered it, but very, very awesome nonetheless. So these guys are a large species of wrasse that are sadly endangered, that live around the Indo-Pacific. So in terms of this group, they're the largest living member of their group. Males are typically larger than females, with males reaching about 2 meters long and weighing up to about 180 kilograms. But average length is about a little less than a meter. Females will really grow larger than a meter. And the species can be easily identified by its large size, and it gets their name, the Humphead Wrasse, because it's got this large hump on its head, and it's a wrasse. Very simple. But also it's got this bright blue color to it, and these patterns and shades of green as well sometimes, which really gives it a characteristic look, so you can tell, oh, that's a Humphead Wrasse. And adults are usually observed living by themselves, but you've often been seen in male-female pairs or potentially small groups as well. So in terms of their habitat, they can be found on the east coast of Africa around the mouth of the Red Sea and some areas in the Indian and Pacific Oceans. Juveniles are typically found in shallow waters, shady areas, sandy areas, bordering coral reefs, while adults are typically found in deeper areas of coral reefs and offshore, typically around lagoons, channels, and outer reef slopes, for example. So these guys are also quite long-lived, but they have a very slow breeding rate. So individuals reach sexual maturity at about 5 to 7 years old, and they live for about 30 years. And they are polygamous hermaphrodites. So what happens is that they're all born female, and then once they reach about the age of 9, they will become males. And this can be up to a lot of factors. It can be due to having a certain amount of area, males in the area, things like that. It's very, very complicated. And then they will lay these eggs, and they're pelagic, so they spread out in the ocean, and then they'll settle on a reef when they're getting bigger and all that, and it's really cool. In terms of their ecology, they're very opportunistic predators. They'll typically feed on mollusks, so that includes gastropods, crustaceans, annelids, and also fish as well. Because half of these guys live under the sand, they will follow fish like stingrays, where they will kind of try and catch them from the stingrays as the stingrays kind of dig up the sand to try and find their food. And they're actually sometimes engage in cooperative hunting with roving coral groupers, so that's a good idea of catching them as well. And it also actually commonly found as well across these slopes and stuff between 3 to 330 feet deep, so about a meter to 100 meters deep. And they typically will search through these corals, and the juveniles tend to be a bit more cryptic, and they will feed on algae and seagrasses, with larger individuals will move into these open habitats and then kind of prey on fish. So in terms of their conservation, they are considered endangered, sadly, and due to a lot of reasons, because they are removed for the pet trade, and even for fishing as well, destructive fishing techniques, habitat loss, consumption, exports of juveniles to obviously the trade, and illegal and unreported fishing, where there's been a lot of issues around areas, which is very unsustainable. So that's why they are considered endangered. But yeah, it's kind of just also something we don't really know about. We don't know much about these guys, so that kind of doesn't help in us monitoring them. But luckily, there have been some protections in place, though they have been fished commercially around the areas, and they're generally considered a part of the Endangered Species Act. So basically, having these, they are protected, and they are considered endangered by the IUCN, so that does give them some protections. Really, really awesome fish, and also done by Leaf and Buffzoo. So next, moving on to another big fish. Really, really cool guy. So this is the also done by Leaf and ARIKA, I believe you say that. We have got the giant groper. Have a look at these wonderful guys here. So these guys are also known as the Queensland groper or the mottled brown sea bass. These guys are a ray-finned fish that live with sea basses. They're in that same group. And they live in the wider Indo-Pacific, and actually one of the largest living extant species of bony fish. So these guys, as you can see, are quite rotund. They get typically about 270 centimeters, or 110 inches long, or up to 180 centimeters, more commonly of 71 inches. And a maximum weight is about 400 kilograms, or 180 pounds. So very, very big animals. And they have this kind of mottled pattern to them, where they get the name the mottled brown sea bass. And they have about a slightly rounded caudal fin as well, and about 62 scales around their lateral line, which is kind of hard to see here. But yeah, these guys are typically they're data deficient, so we really don't know much about their populations. But we know they have a wide distribution. They can be found across the Indo-Pacific. They can be found around Hawaii, southern Japan. They've been observed in New Zealand and southern Australia, the Tasman Sea, Christmas Island as well, the Persian Gulf. They are absent, but they have been listed as potentially an invasive species in the Bahamas as well, though they don't know really what populations there. They've been reported there, but we don't really know. But these guys are a species that live in shallow water and can be found at depths between 1 and 100 meters. And they often associate with reefs, and they're actually the largest bony fish that can be found in reefs. Large specimens can be caught in shores and harbours as well. So the adults are mainly solitary, and they'll hold territories around these lagoons, and they've also been caught in turbid water as well. A giant groper, they're also an opportunistic ambush predator. So what they'll do is they will feed on whatever they can find. It includes juvenile sea turtles, small sharks, crustaceans, mollusks, and other fish that are swallowed whole. And they actually favor, when they live in rocky reefs and stuff, eat lobsters. And they'll often eat like lots of that as well. And fish actually living in estuarine environments, we've seen on crabs. And being big fish, they're typically long-lived and solitary. However, they actually do kind of like friendly, and they like to be around divers that they're solitary. Though you should not feed them, and you should be careful because they're big fish and they can hurt you. And in terms of their breeding, similar to the wrasse, these guys are predators hermaphrodites, and they will spawn in a lunar cycle. So the spawn will last about 7 days, and they will broadcast spawn, so that means usually several females per male. And studies in captive populations suggest the dominant male and female will begin spawning event as nearly as the other spawners in the first day or two, so they will spawn in one go. And they are diacritic protogynous hermaphrodites, which means that some males develop the reproductively functioning females, and other males will start to produce sperm, and without even have to go through the phase of becoming a reproductive female. So it's very interesting. So yeah, in terms of the utilization, they're a highly valued food, fish food, and they also will consume their gallbladder, stomach, things like that in Chinese medicines, which obviously can sometimes lead to their populations being depleted. And also, people like them in the live reef food fish trade and smaller specimens as well. They have been captive bred in Taiwan and things like that. So very, very interesting, cool fish. Who doesn't love a big grouper? Done by Leaf and Akuria, I believe you say that. Next, we got our last fish, but definitely not the least fish. We have got here the Greenland shark. Let's have a look at the Greenland shark. Also done by GiornoPizza, Buffzoo, and Ultimate Fishing Simulator, I think it is. But yeah, really, really awesome fish here. So these guys are as I mentioned, the Greenland shark, also known as the grey shark. They are typically found in the northern parts of the Arctic, so very restricted range, like North Atlantic. They're actually one of the largest living sharks as well. They usually grow about 6.4 meters or 21 feet long, and they could weigh up to a ton or 2,200 pounds, but they've recorded getting up to 7.3 meters or 24 feet and up to 1,400 kilograms or 3,100 pounds. The most get about between 2.4 to 4.8 meters, 8 to 16 feet, and weigh about 400 kilograms. And they are very similar to the Pacific sleeper shark, with males typically being smaller than females. And they're quite thick-set, as you can see here, quite big, round species. They're not adapted for swimming fast. And colorations can vary a lot from being grey to blackish brown, kind of stuff like that. Not very too different. And they actually have a rolling motion to their jaws, with the upper teeth kind of being thin and pointed, and they're able to interlock as well and kind of pull away from carcasses and things like that. But these guys have a very interesting diet as well. They're an apex predator that they eat mostly fish, but they have been known to hunt seals in Canada. Recorded fish that these guys have eaten include skates, eels, herrings, lumpfish, wolffish, flounder, things like that. And small Greenland sharks will predominantly eat squid. And the largest sharks, greater than 200 centimeters, have been seen eating prey such as benthic fish as well as seals. And the largest ones have been known to eat redfish, which is very interesting. And because of their slow speed, they often hunt prey that are asleep, and they use their corrective coloration to kind of hide and then go up and grab it. And they eat a lot of things that people just like, what the heck are they eating? And that includes seals, polar bears, moose, and reindeer have been seen in their guts, and is believed because these are scavenger and they're attracted to the smell of rotting flesh, and they also scavenge on seals as well. And although this could easily consume a human, typically humans don't go diving in the North Atlantic, so you're pretty much safe. And they're very slow as well, but obviously be careful. This is a big animal if you ever do that. So in terms of their movement, they're an ectotherm that lives in an just above freezing environment, and they have the lowest swim speed and tail beat frequency of any fish, and they likely have this is likely tied to their extreme longevity, as I'll get into, and their very slow metabolism. And their fastest cruising speed is only about 2 kilometers an hour. sadly, about 1.6 miles per hour, and they typically only have half of the typical sea otter's diet. So they're able to pretty much get more out of eating less, which is very interesting. And to talk about their longevity, they're actually the longest known lifespan of any vertebrate. One Greenland shark was recorded basically 1936 to recapture 1952, and it suggests they grow at a rate of about 1 centimeter per year, or even half a centimeter. And the ages have been estimated to, they've actually radiocarboned some dead sharks, and the oldest sampled would have lived between 392 to 120 years. So it lived between 1504 and 1744, so quite a long-lived animal, and it's believed they reach sexual maturity. So this is reaching sexual maturity at about 150 years age. So that's like insane. It's just 150 years. It's effort, and because of this long generation time, there's been really a lot of efforts to try and protect them in their habitat because they take that long to breed. So basically, if we hurt their populations now, it'll take them hundreds of years to, even thousands of years to potentially recover. So you got to be very careful with that. But in terms of reproduction, they actually found not to deposit eggs in the bottom mud, but they had actually developed their embryos in their body, and they have an estimated gestation time of about 8 to 18 years. So imagine being pregnant for 8 to 18 years. That wouldn't be fun. And about 10 pups are born per litter, and each initially measures about 38 to 42 centimeters. And when they are in the uterus of the Greenland shark, the villi will serve a function in supplying the oxygen to the embryos. And it's also speculated due to the metabolism dealing with respiration that only allows for that limited litter size. And this has been due to their extreme longevity. They actually can have up to 200 to 700 pups in their lifetime. So they breed super slow, but they can make a lot of pups. So it all checks out. Nature's all about balancing. But in terms of their very interesting history. In terms of food, these guys are considered toxic, so they have too much triethylamine, which can be very, very dangerous. So they're typically not eaten. Main issues tend to be because since they're so slow, and issues to their habitats such as climate change is believed to be a big issue for these Greenland sharks. And threats to these guys include they've been targeted for their liver oil until the development of synthetic oils. So their populations are starting to come back, and they're likely affected by climate change due to the changes in the sea ice and temperatures and things like that, which is really affecting their populations. But they seem to be doing okay so far. I believe they are considered vulnerable. So very, very wonderful species there. Really cool shark. So that was done by GiornoPizza, Buffzoo, and Ultimate Fishing Simulator. But now we're moving on to some new animals. I'm very excited to talk about these guys. So we have got here the Great Heron, or not Great Egret. Yeah, wrong one. But yeah, look at these wonderful guys here. So these guys are also known as the common egret, or just the great white egret, or the great white heron. These guys are very widely found species. They can be found in Africa, the Americas, Asia, and Southern Europe, and have actually been found in more northerly parts of Europe as well, and considered least concern. So these guys are a large heron. They stand about a meter tall, and the species can reach about 80 to 104 centimeters, 31 to 41 inches in length, and have a wingspan of 131 to 170 centimeters. And their body mass can range between about 700 to 1,500 grams, or about 1.5 to 3.3 pounds. And typically average about 1,000 grams, so they typically get about a kilo. And they're only slightly smaller than the grey heron or the great blue heron, which we'll talk about soon. Really interesting animals. So these guys typically just white with this yellow beak and dark legs here. They got this long neck, long legs for their ecology. Very similar to like herons and bitterns and things like that. In terms of their range, they're very, very common. Basically found all across the world. The only places you wouldn't find them is like the north parts, the Sahara Desert, and Australia and New Zealand. They're very, very common. In terms of conservation, there was a lot killed around in America due to looking for decorating hats, but there have been some conservation efforts to protect them. And some parts they've declined due to habitat loss and things like that, but luckily they are doing okay generally in the world. In terms of their ecology, they tend to breed in colonies and trees, and near large lakes with reef beds and other extensive wetlands. They typically begin to breed at about 2 to 3 years of age, and they form monogamous pairs each season, and when the pairing carries over to the next season is not known. The male will select a nest area, start the nest, and then try to attract the female, and the nest is made with stick and lining materials and things like that, and it can be up to 3 feet across, and usually up to 6 blue eggs, bluish green eggs, are laid at a time, with both the male and the female, or both sexes, incubating the eggs, and the incubation period is between 23 and 26 days, with the young being fed by regurgitation by the parents, so they'll throw up into the males, and they're able to fly within 6 to 7 weeks of hatching. So in terms of their diet, these guys typically prefer shallow water or in dry habitats where they feed mostly on fish, frogs, small mammals, and occasionally smaller reptiles, crustaceans, and insects. And they typically will impale them with their long yellow beaks there, and they allow them to come within striking distance of the bill, and then they kind of just spear it and then eat it, which is very interesting. And in terms of culture, these guys are considered a symbol of the National Audubon Society, and in Belarus, the commemorative coin had an image of the great egret, and also featured in the New Zealand $2 coin and the Hungarian 5 fortnit coin. So they're quite common around these areas. They're very rare in New Zealand and Australia, but they can be found there. Really, really awesome animals there, the great egret. Very, very cool. This was again done by Ginger Toast, and Ginger Toast didn't only make not one bird, but we got another bird coming up. We have got the grey heron, a very, very wonderful bird. So let's talk about these guys, also done by Ginger Toast. Very, very awesome. Look at these wonderful feathers they got here. So these guys are a long-legged wading bird that are native throughout temperate Europe and Asia, but also found in parts in Africa. And they are resident in most of their range, though some populations do migrate a little bit. In terms of the habitats, they love wetlands similar to the egrets. They tend to live around lakes, rivers, ponds, marshes, and on the sea coast, but they feed mostly on aquatic creatures, so things, as I mentioned, like fish, insects, small reptiles, things like that. Very, very interesting. And they are quite a large bird. They can stand to about 100 centimeters tall, or about 40 inches tall, so about a meter, and they measure 84 to 102 centimeters long, with 155 to 195 centimeter, or 61 to 77 inch wingspan. And the body weight can reach about 1.02 to 2.8 kilograms, or 2 to 4 pounds. So a big bird would be about 2 kilograms. And you can see their plumage is like this really nice ashy color here, with some white around the necks, but they also have these kind of checkered patterns going around the hair as well. This dappling pattern as well. And they also have these long, I don't know what the term is, but they have this long feathers around the base of the head there that look really, really interesting. I think it's called superculum, I believe. They got the crest going there. And the iris, as you can see, is yellow, and they got this yellow beak as well. And their main call is this loud croaking, frank, frank, and they use a lot of these sounds to kind of breed in, communicate with each other in their breeding colonies. So in terms of the distribution habitat, as I mentioned, they're pretty much found throughout most of Africa. They breed in parts of like northern Europe and Asia, and they breed there, and then they sometimes will non-breed in places such as southern Europe, northern Africa, places like that. They're just very, very widespread, very common species, and they're known to actually be vagrants in like Caribbean, Greenland, the Aleutian Islands, and Newfoundland, with some sightings seen there, but obviously they're just vagrants. But they live basically across the native to Africa, Southeast Asia, Northern Asia as well, and mainly Europe. So quite a common species, if I do say so myself. So in terms of behavior, they kind of have this S-shaped neck that's very similar to lots of other herons and things like that. And they often will fly short distances and soar, but not as often. And in spring, they kind of will soar high to try and above the heronry, and then they'll chase each other as well. In terms of their diet, they prefer aquatic environments where they feed on things such as fish, amphibians, small mammals, and insects. But they've actually been observed in killing young birds such as ducklings, and even birds as large as like a water rail. They can take those, where they kind of use the same kind of hunting strategies as the egret, where they'll just stab their prey with their beak and swallow them whole. And they also will regurgitate pellets, where they'll have food and bones, fur and bones, and chitinous remains of insects, so you can kind of tell what they've been eating. And in terms of breeding, they will breed in colonies called heronries, which are usually in high trees close to lakes or on the seashore or wetlands and things like that, where they build them up in the trees, and they use the same nest year after year until it's blown down. And it starts as a small platform of sticks, and they basically build it up over years. And they usually use smaller twigs, things like that. And breeding activity typically takes place between February and June, and when the birds arrived at the nest, a greeting ceremony with each partner, they kind of lower their plumes and all that, and mess around and stuff like that. And courtship will often call the male calling to the nesting site, and of the arrival of the female, they'll stretch and kind of dance to each other and do that and mate, or not mate necessarily then, but they will often even like fly up and chase each other, stuff like that, until they basically decide, oh, we're mating. And a clutch of these guys is usually about 3 to 5, though as few or as many as 2 to 7 can be found, but on average about 3 to 5, where they have these eggs that have a matte surface that are greenish brown, and normally laid in 2-day intervals with incubation usually starting after the first or second egg has been laid. They will often take about 25 days to incubate, and both parents, when the young hatch, they will bring babies regurgitated food to the young, and later the adults will often disgorge the food in the neck. They squabble for it, and they fledge at about 7 to 8 weeks old until a single brood is raised each year, but 2 broods have been recorded, which is very interesting. And the oldest recorded bird has been lived up to about 23 years, but the estimated average life expectancy in the wild is about 5 years, and only about a third of juveniles survive their second year because they often fall victim to predation. So that includes lots of animals such as crows, kites, even otters, so lots of other predators. And in terms of human culture, they have often been associated with like the sun, creation, rebirth, especially in ancient Egypt, or even in Rome as well. They've kind of considered like a sign of a coming event as well. And very, very interesting birds, if I do say so myself. So again, this one was also done by Ginger Toast. And we're moving on to our last animal. We're moving on to a big mammal, an extinct one too. So this is the last, but certainly not least. We've got the Bison latifrons, or the extinct longhorn bison, or the giant bison. So we'll have a look at these big males here. So look at this big male, isn't he so cool? So these guys, Bison latifrons, or the giant bison, their proper taxonomic name would be Bos latifrons, because bison is not really considered a true genus anymore. These guys are extinct species of bison that lived in North America during the Pleistocene, where they lived from Alaska to Mexico, and were actually the largest and heaviest bovid ever to live in North America. And they thrived in North America for 200,000 years until they became extinct during the late glacial maximum, so about 12,000 years ago, similar with animals such as the Columbian mammoth, saber-toothed cats, a lot of those species. And they're very, very huge, as you can see here. So we'll have a look at the male as we talk about the interesting body dimensions of the specimen. So because only skulls and her horns have been preserved, the size of these guys is not really well known, but they're estimated to be about twice the size as your modern bison, which makes it pretty much one of the largest ruminants ever. So the known dimensions are on average larger than most extinct and extant bovids, and they probably get about 4.75 meters or 15 feet in length, and stood about 2.3 or 7 feet 5 inches or 2.5 meters at the withers. So that's about 8 feet. So very, very huge. They had an estimated weight between 1,250 or 2,760 pounds to 2,000 or 4,400 pounds. So very, very large, up to 2 tons, very big animal, and was one of the largest ruminants ever to exist. That has actually been only rivaled in mass by the modern giraffe, that can get up to 2 tons, and the prehistoric longhorn buffalo, Palavolus, which is another different species of bovid that's got quite large. And as you can see, where they get their name, the longhorn bison, these bisons have quite long horns, and they've been measured as great as 213 centimeters from tip to tip. And that is compared to the 66 centimeters to 90 centimeters of the modern day bisons. So they're basically like twice the size as normal bisons. So it's very interesting. So in terms of the habitat, these guys would have lived in small herds and small family groups grazing along the Great Plains and woodlands. There's a recent study that showed that these guys may have been had an ecology kind of similar to a gaur. So they would have lived in parkland and woodland areas, feeding on kind of those things, while the modern bison, or kind of Bison antiquus at the time, was more in the open areas and living on the Great Plains, things like that. So these guys were a little bit more in the closed habitats. Ecology probably more similar to like a wisent or a gaur rather than your typical American bison. But they believe that actually preferred the warmer areas of the United States, and has been found as far south and as far west as modern-day San Diego and California, so pretty much found across the Americas. And these large horns that they had here were most likely employed by defense against predators that lived in the time. So like giant short-faced bears, saber-toothed cats, dire wolves, a lot of these guys here. And they also would have been used to establish the right to mate. And they actually found a Bilatifrons in Mexico as well. So they probably had quite a wide range. But we can have a look at the females here. So the females still had quite large horns, but it's obviously the males that you want to show off. But similar to other bovids, the females are typically quite a bit smaller than the males. And we'll have a look at this cute little baby here. So this is not too different from your normal bison. But yeah, I really like the speculative look that colors that Arowana has given it. I think it came out really nice. But yeah, we'll talk about their extinction while we talk about it. So these guys would have lived in mid-continent North America after the steppe bison or bison priscus, which was another prehistoric species of bison, migrated from the land bridge about 240 to 220,000 years ago, even about 300,000 years ago. And they evolved in the Americas, becoming slightly different from your steppe bison and became their own species eventually. And they were one of the many species that went extinct at the end of the Ice Age, along with the mammoths, mastodons, saber-toothed cats, the giant short-faced bear, all of those really big and cool American animals that used to live here during the Ice Age all went extinct about this time. And it's believed that these guys just couldn't adapt. It's a very complicated topic. Couldn't adapt. Disease, potentially human hunting, basically any combination of the three as well. Even a meteor sometimes. We really just don't kind of know, but we suspect in America it was most likely due to climate change and human impacts. And these guys went extinct at the end of the Ice Age, leaving no descendants. And it's believed that their relative Bianticus, or which is basically now just considered the modern bison, the modern bison survived, got smaller, and basically managed to better adapt to the changing environments and changing habitats that moved from the Pleistocene to the Holocene. And there may have been evidence of hybridization with other bison species, things like that, but a decreasing in size in this hybridization may have actually allowed the bison to do well, and they actually potentially exploded after the Holocene, since a lot of their competition, the giant herbivores, were gone. So by the time Europeans first got to the Americas, there would have been estimated about 60 million bison. And sadly, due to colonialism and a lot of that, both racism and basically people wanting to feed their families, as America kind of set itself up, the population went down to like half, only about 1,000 or so for both subspecies, the wood and the plains bison. But luckily, due to some great conservation work, the population now, after about 100 years or so, has got back to about 500,000. So the American bison itself was a really, really great conservation story. It was very sad that the longhorn bison didn't join the American bison in that regard. So before we head off, we're just going to thank Arowana for this wonderful bison. You can see how big his wonderful horns are. So, yeah, thank you for everyone who made these ones. Really, really wonderful. So, yeah, I really, really, really hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you guys like and subscribe. Always remember to hit the little bell icon to get notified about anything. So yeah, hopefully you guys enjoy this video. Hope you guys like and subscribe. And bye-bye.